Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Croydon Constitutionalist podcast, bringing classical liberalism to South London and beyond via YouTube, Stitcher and the Apple Podcasts. My partner in podcasting today is Mike Swadling, the co-founder of the Croydon Constitutionalists. Mike, what have we got to discuss today on this very, very festive podcast?
Hello Dan, well, so we're talking about Brexit as usual, the meaningful vote, preparations for the no deal, or WTO terms, and in Croydon, some levers of Croydon drinks coming up. We're talking about your and I decision to leave UKIP, something people may have seen in some of the local papers. A trip I recently took to Orange County, California, and a meeting with the Libertarian Party there. A message for Croydon Council. A review of Croydon's year in politics. And of course, nothing at this time of year would be complete without some predictions for 2019.
Indeed. So Brexit. So not very much has happened, but by the same token, quite a lot has happened since our last podcast. Theresa May is still the Prime Minister, just about, having survived a no confidence vote, in which, from my calculations, about half of the MPs who are not members of the government actually voted against her in that. And of course the meaningful vote has been delayed until looks like the middle of January. Mike, you were away for some of this, but clearly something that we're all very interested in. What's your take on this?
Well, I was away in the States when the actual vote of confidence in Theresa May came through. That was covered really extensively in the US. Just interesting to see it from a different lens. Yes, nothing's changed, but the Prime Minister's position has significantly weakened, I think. The notion that May's deal is going through seems to have diminished, and there is more support and more people firming up both for the erosion of our democracy that would be a second referendum and the honouring our democracy that would be a leaving clean Brexit and leaving on WTO terms. But both sides of that, I think, are firming up, and we see that there. In other times, Theresa May's vote of confidence would have seen her resign. Hard to see how a Prime Minister carries on with such a low support from her backbenches. But may you live in interesting times is proving to be a worse and worse proverb all the time.
Indeed, she put off the vote, the meaningful vote, which everybody believes she would have lost, but then has gone back to Brussels, trying to get some sort of. They won't renegotiate the agreement, but to get some sort of kind words in respect to the backstop situation. Do you think she would have been better to have held the vote, lost the vote, and then gone back? Or do you think she's done it the right way round?
No, I think you're absolutely right. To have held the vote and lost it would have given her some leverage in negotiating with Brussels. Throughout this entire process, we have seen the British side never have or use any leverage. And I say have leverage, they do have it, but they've not been prepared to get to a position where they can express that to the EU. So if you start from a premise, we're leaving without a deal, and we're not paying you a penny. And if there are some liabilities that they say, well, we won't pick up as a result, pensions, whatever, they say, fantastic, no worries, we'll take them off your hands. We just won't pay you a penny. We're leaving without a deal. That's happening on this date. What can you offer us? All of a sudden, the conversation changes very quickly. You're using the leverage you've got. When they say they want to block the City of London, you say, no, absolutely, we're not sending any of our billions of pounds of capital that fund your manufacturing industries across to you anymore. Goodbye. And all of a sudden, they're frightened. And here, Theresa May had the opportunity to not get a deal that they have agreed, and I believe they want, to have it crushed in the House of Commons and be able to go back and go, we're off, guys. You've seen what your terrible proposal has given me. Give me a break. Throw me a chance here, yeah. And of course she decided not to take it. Once again, really just proving what a shabby set of negotiators her, Gavin, Ollie, and the rest of that cabal are.
It has been a shocking negotiating strategy from day one. You're absolutely right. So the cabinet now seems to be, as you say, sort of split effectively between those who are looking for perhaps let's call it a managed no deal situation, and those who are angling towards okay, in public they're supporting the deal, but they're possibly angling towards some sort of Norway or Norway for now or EFTA membership, and with the threat that they say that if we don't get what we want, then we're going to start supporting this people's vote, this second referendum for losers, basically. What do you think is going to go on there? It's remarkable to have cabinet ministers basically briefing the opposite viewpoint. Strikes me that sort of, to a great extent, collective responsibility has just disappeared.
It really has. I mean, it's short of one of the cabinet putting their letter in. It's very hard to see, and I'll use the word again, what leverage Theresa May has over cabinet members. If she were to sack anyone of any prominence, that's probably her premiership done. So they know that, and that's why they're allowed to get away with these things. If she should at least try to hold people to account. She could put things out in public to say that it's unhelpful. She could embarrass them. She's not choosing to do any of those things because she's not choosing to use the leverage she's got, and it keeps coming back to this view. The people's vote that and indeed some of them have kind of garnered around that. Of course, not least of all the sister of one of the senior people in the people's vote, Amber Rudd. But I have a suspicion. I've had a suspicion all along that a lot of the Labour MPs and SNP MPs that back a people's vote, or a loser's vote, let's get more accuracy, won't, if push came to shove, back it. They know just how terrible it would be for our democracy if we were to renege on the referendum of 2016. And it suits them now to cause trouble and to boost their own support amongst the 16 to 24-year-olds to talk about another referendum. But actually, if it came to it, I'm pretty sure that support would crumble away.
You might be onto something there, Mike, because, I mean, Jeremy Corbyn is very much against a second referendum. He's been quoted in The Guardian very recently saying, Brexit is going to happen. He might want a slightly different deal than what's currently on the table, and that allows him effectively to vote it down and to get his MPs to vote it down. But very much at least the very top of the Labour Party understands that. I think he understands it as well because he knows that a lot of the things that he wants to do, should he become Prime Minister, he wouldn't be able to do if he was still in the EU or indeed in the single market as part of some new agreement. Because basically the state aid rules, and indeed some of the state aid rules which are in this agreement, would stop him doing things like nationalising various industries and even renationalising the railways. So he knows he doesn't want that. But some of them, some of the sort of David Lammy types, they seem just, called Ramonas in the past. I think they're just more like Remainiacs. They just, it's beyond. It's as if, David Lammy thinks that, I think he's the MP for Tottenham, he thinks that London is just a different country to, the Midlands and the North, and he doesn't seem to understand that, if you've got lots of Labour MPs up there, and you've got obviously some in London, they do have to work together and have a common idea about what the future of the country is. But he doesn't seem to care. So we are where we are, Mike. So what do you think is going to happen then in terms of a second referendum or a general election? I'll take Michael Portillo's view on this, which is he's always believed that there will be a second referendum. Anyone that watches This Week, he has been saying for some time he expects there to be a second general election, a snap general election, not referendum, before this goes through. The parties appear to be gearing up slightly for it. So I really wouldn't be surprised if somehow that happened.
when you look at the timings, it's hard to see how anything that isn't already on the books can now come into play, except for the deal from Theresa May. That's the only thing that could happen now that I can see. Anything else, I do not see how in the next 90 days or so we have the time to achieve it. I could be proved wrong, but to organise a snap general election, that could happen in time. But actually, can they get a new government get the primary legislation through to defer Brexit? I'm not sure they could. You couldn't hold another referendum between now and March 29th, not unless you were recklessly cavalier, although indeed the whole idea is recklessly cavalier, but with democracy. And a new deal to be negotiated and put before Parliament, time is really running out.
Indeed it is. But, we're told now that the UK has started to ramp up its no-deal preparations. Certainly the EU has now decided that it's going to actually tell us some things that might happen, such as they have said that if there is no deal, that lorries travelling from Britain to the continent will be allowed to continue travelling to the continent without any new permits of any description, certainly until the end of 2019. Because they know that there isn't the time to put anything in place, should they wish to put anything in place, and they know that they quite like stuff coming from Britain to Europe. So they know the situation there. Spain has recently announced that as long as Britain respects the rights of Spanish people living in Britain, they will do the same for British expats over in Spain. Not surprisingly, really, because most of those people are quite well-off pensioners who actually bring something to a very, very poor economy in Spain. And Switzerland, of course, has announced that should there be no deal, that we will be able to continue to trade with them as we do now. Technically speaking, if there was no deal, then we wouldn't be part of the EU, and so the agreement between Switzerland and the EU, which Britain is currently part of, wouldn't come into play. So they've just said, we've got a new agreement ready to sign straight away, don't worry about it. So it's quite clear that you can have these arrangements in place ahead of March the 29th. This looks to me like good progress on what you might call a managed no deal. Is that what we're after?
I think it's exactly what we're after. It's on us a referendum. We leave the EU. We leave the EU in a way that is beneficial to us and them, in that both sides get to move on. We trade on WTO terms, and we are recording this on an iPhone right now, as I often say to people. This is manufactured in China and assembled often in the States. It's using US technology and intellectual property. And this exists. I went into a shop in Britain and brought it. It's an actual real thing. And all these people that tell you won't be able to do deals with the continent, trade goods with the continent, we won't have any fresh food anymore come March the 30th. This iPhone physically exists. I can see it in front of me now. And we can easily move on under WTO terms. I actually genuinely think it will be good for the EU. I'm not someone that has a particularly strong view on the EU once we're out of it. It's no longer my problem. There are a set of countries in Europe that really do want closer union. There are a set of countries that don't. But what they all have in common is that they are on the continent together and we are absolutely not. And us being out and them not having a legacy of deals with Britain might be very positive for all of them. And of course the Swiss want to carry on dealing with us. We have a huge trading relationship with Switzerland. Of course lorries are allowed to go. The lorries take British goods that European citizens want, and guess what they do on the return journey? They pick up European goods that British citizens want, that earns them money. Of course we're going to keep allowing this to happen. And with 90 days to go, let's get the plans in place.
Most definitely. Speaking of plans, that we've got some drinks locally coming up in January. Mike, can you give us the details of that?
Well, who cares what's going on in Parliament? Who cares what's going on in Brussels? The most important Brexit event of the next 6 weeks is the 22nd of January, upstairs at the Skylark in South Croydon from 7 p.m. Leavers of Croydon will be having a drink, so that's myself and Dan and as many of you that can join us. The Skylark is the big Wetherspoons pub in the south end of Croydon from 7 p.m. onwards. 22nd of Jan, come and meet up with old friends, share some stories, make new friends, and let's keep the community going, because who knows when we'll all be needing to don yellow jackets together.
Indeed. Hopefully not the yellow jackets, and hopefully we won't have to, but you're absolutely right with this threat of a second referendum. Potentially we can't rest on our laurels on that case. Now then, there's been some news regarding ourselves in the last few weeks. Some's made it into the local media, so people may already be aware of it. Both of us decided that we would be leaving the UK Independence Party after several years of membership and standing for various positions, council and Parliament. Mike, would you like to explain to the listeners why you made that decision?
Yes, certainly. So, as many of you will be aware, UK Independence Party, well, of course you'll all be aware, was really a single issue party in many ways about us leaving the EU. But it did have a broader set of policies and of course done very well a number of times at elections. It was, when I joined it, a broadly libertarian party, and the Croydon Constitutionalists are a classically liberal group, or looking to promote classically liberal ideas, and that's very close to libertarian ideals. UKIP indeed has that in their constitution. They were also, to stop entryism, a party that banned people that had ever been members of the BNP, National Front, or had been prominent in the EDL. And that really was a strong stance against other parties, and proved that UKIP was not a racist party, not a nationalist party, but was a party of Britain, but a broadly libertarian party of Britain, rather than a racially identifying party. Subsequently, in recent times, things have started to change, and many of you will be aware that Nigel Farage has now left UKIP, Susan Evans has now left UKIP, and a number of other prominent people. The two that really done it for me, and I'd sort of come to this decision a couple of weeks before we announced, and it was Patrick O'Flynn and Bill Etheridge. Two different wings of UKIP. One was a member of the Libertarian wing, Bill Etheridge, and he's joined the Libertarian Party. And one was a member of a group that was loosely known as Red UKIP, more social democratic view, and he's joined the SDP party many of us hadn't heard of for many years. But these were two people that definitely differed on policy in quite a lot of fundamental ways, but within a broad UKIP tent, but were definitely the respectable wings of UKIP. And they both chose to go. They are both reasonably big names, but not such big names that they are choosing to move on for their own Machiavellian reasons. I'm not casting aspersions at anyone else is, but they couldn't be. They're not in that kind of level, I think, without wishing to. I think that's a reasonable thing to say about both of them. And the fact that they chose to go really showed the loss that UKIP had. UKIP has, and Gerard Basson has been getting closer to Tommy Robinson, who was both a former member of the BNP and set up the EDL. Now, whatever you think of Tommy, that would preclude him from joining UKIP. The NEC, Gerard had brought a motion to the NEC that we hold a ballot on allowing this one person to join the party. That to me seems a ridiculous waste of money, but that's what the leader wanted to do. The NEC postponed that and said, let's get on with Brexit first, then we can change our focus. Gerard appears to me to have lost some of that focus on Brexit and appointed Tommy Robinson eventually as a personal advisor. And this was a distinction without merit. What we now have is a UKIP that has lost many of its respectable leading lights, has appointed someone that is effectively against its own constitution, and is focusing more on racial issues than it is on Brexit, and it's no longer a Libertarian Party. And those set of reasons, although still a leading Leave Party, no doubt about it, the leading Leave Party, those set of reasons made me feel I no longer was suited to be a member of them. Dan, I don't know, sorry, that went on more than I expected to, but any thoughts to add to that?
Not particularly, but my feelings on the subject are basically the same as yours. Gerard Batten was not elected by the members. He put himself forward and said, after the debacle that occurred with Mr. Bolton, he said, the party's in a bit of strife financially. I will sort that out. Let me be the leader for 12 months, and then I'll decide whether to put myself up for election or stand aside and let somebody else take over. I will concentrate simply on Brexit and sorting out the party's finances. He has, to be fair, sorted out the party's finances in the short term, and the party still exists, and there was a threat that it wouldn't do. But he's obviously decided to try to turn the party into a party in his own image. And that's an image that I disagree with. And that is why I chose to resign as the chairman of the local Croydon branch and from the party. So what happens with the local branch going forward and what happens with UKIP going forward, we'll have to see. I enjoyed my time in the party, absolutely, and made many friends, and wish those who I've worked with all the best in their future personal endeavours. But unfortunately the party has moved in a certain direction. It's a direction that I am not even remotely comfortable with, and by resigning, I think it frees me up to concentrate more on the Croydon constitutionalists and putting forward libertarian ideas and classically liberal ideas, which, being part of UKIP, I do not believe going forward would allow me to do. That part of my political life is now closed, and I'm going to be concentrating on the Croydon constitutionalists.
And that's a good point there, Dan. I think for both of us, it does free us up. Lots of good friends and memories from time in UKIP, but things have changed, and sadly quite dramatically. But the focus on Brexit is still there. We've got the Leavers drinks that we're setting up. I hope we won't set up any more Brexit street stalls, because things are afoot and we just leave on the 29th of March. But who knows, in this crazy world that might change, and we will be at the forefront of events in Croydon making sure Brexit happens. And we hope that you all who have volunteered and worked with us for the past almost 3 years now, continue on that journey should it be needed.
Hear, hear. Well, speaking of political parties, when you were over in the States, you should be on the beach and such things, but no, Swaddling decides to go along to a committee meeting of the Libertarian Party of Orange County. Mike, how did you find that?
Yes, so I was I was out in the States for a week, out in California, and Newport Beach I was staying, which is just south of Los Angeles. And I sort of had a quick Google around of what's their local Libertarian Party like as the third party of the US. The Libertarian candidate has finished third place in the last 2 US presidential elections. And they happened to have a meeting on the day I got there, sort of a few hours after I was due to arrive in Newport Beach, at the local library, of their executive committee. So I thought, well, here's a great opportunity. Contacted them, and they were incredibly welcoming. Really interesting to see. So, give you a bit of an idea about Orange County. Orange County is historically the one big Republican part of coastal California. The last midterms in November, it swung quite heavily Democrat. But compared to the rest of coastal California, it's still very Republican. And that's why the Libertarians feel they've got maybe a bit of an edge there to be the to be the alternative to the Republicans and Democrats, and certainly the alternative to the Republicans, who are have really gone down in esteem to a lot of Californians. Trump, love him or loathe him, doesn't sit well as a New Yorker with a lot of people from Los Angeles. The culture change is really, really kind of roughs up against each other. So the Libertarians would like to kind of fill that angle in the middle. A few stats. So Orange County covers an area of 1.7 million registered voters. In America, you register with a party. So there are 13,000, or about 1%, are registered as Libertarians. The party itself has only 80 members. So you can see how 1.7 million to 80 is a huge gap, but that's how US politics works. There aren't many party members, and campaigns tend to get people involved more than parties. Really interesting committee meeting. Many of you listening to this, I imagine, will have been on committees of all sorts, and particularly in political parties. It was reassuringly or depressingly dull as many other committee meeting I've ever been on. But interesting to see nonetheless. Few sort of things to take away from it. In the last midterms, their neighbouring county, Riverside, they had someone elected, a Libertarian elected to the Board of Supervisors for the county, and think like a super GLA member, kind of a high-profile GLA post. That person spent $600,000, and I'll repeat that, $600,000 on their election. That is more than the Green Party and UKIP combined spent in the 2017 general election. This is in one county in California for one post was spent by one candidate from a minor party. He actually beat someone that spent more than twice as much as him. The local party has more than a couple of £1,000 of cash from 80 people, which is quite impressive. Some of you might be used to greater amounts in politics. I'm not used to greater amounts than that. And I know they've got more than that because they have to register it publicly, so I'm not breaking a confidence. But it was just interesting to know there's quite a lot of cash that floats around. A couple of little things that are different from politics over here. Where we often leaflet, they're not allowed to put leaflets into mailboxes in the US. Mailboxes are owned by the federal government, and you have to leave a leaflet either on someone's door or sort of stuck in their door or on their porch. You cannot put it in the mailbox. You will get fined. What they want you to do is use the post office to deliver leaflets rather than people doing it themselves. And that's just quite interesting, I found. I also spoke to them about doing street stalls, and many of you will be used to that if you're involved in politics. Absolutely a non-starter in somewhere that everyone drives. There's just not the footfall anywhere. And they looked at me and they thought I was mad when I was talking to them about the idea of a street stall. And eventually someone chipped up and said, "Oh no, we are allowed to do that here. We just don't. It's just not a thing that happens." So some interesting little challenges. Well, I wrote up an article, and it's on our Croydon Constitutionalist website, which is croydonconstitutionalist.uk. Worth having a little look. Really interesting to see a different side of politics. And if people are interested in US politics, particularly a slightly more quirky end, worth having a quick read.
Cheers for that, Mike. I'm still surprised that you had the options of going surfing and what have you in California, but no, you went to a committee meeting of a political party.
Do you see me surfing? You can go whale watching from Newport Beach. That's all I'm going to say. I didn't intend to add to it.
Fair enough. Okay, so moving on. We recently issued a press release, a document, a message, if you will, for Croydon Council for the coming year, in which we set out some interesting ideas about what they could do and what they shouldn't do. And we've detailed within it some information about what they have been spending money on that is not exactly the most transparent way to spend money and perhaps not the most useful way to spend money. Mike, what were the highlights of that?
Worthwhile having a Google, or people contact me, I can send them the link. Croydon Council has a website where it details all amounts over £500 it spends. And I have created a database of the last couple of years' worth of expense in that. And looking at this year, we have 9 months for this year, so September was the last date that a spreadsheet's up for, which is fair enough. £36,100 was spent on Croydon Pride. The Oval Tavern received £5,000. Now, I like the Oval Tavern. It's a nice pub. Not sure why £5,000 of taxpayers' money needs to go to it. And this were both from the Cultural Growth Fund. The Cultural Growth Fund is about providing cultural events in Croydon. And from the £373,000 of payments over £500, they made payments to Remarkable Productions Company Limited of 50 grand, almost 30,000 from We Made That, 9,500 for the Festival of Peace in Croydon, and there were a number of things that all got £10,000 exactly each, which seems a surprisingly round number. The £9,625 to the Drunken Chorus Arts Collective was perhaps one of my favourite named items. The question with all of these things is Croydon Council constantly talks about a lack of money. It put up council tax another 5% this year. I don't know whether any of you have got £9,625 for the Drunken Chorus Arts Collective. Well, it turns out you did if you're a Croydon Council taxpayer. And I don't feel that these are the things that taxpayers should be forced to pay for. If there is a spare £9,600, I think there's a school in Croydon that needs it. I think there are homeless people in Croydon that need it. I think there are Meals on Wheels and community care services in Croydon that need it far more than the arts do. And that's really what taxpayers, that's why we pay our council tax for basic services, and that's not what Croydon Council are doing. We also don't pay it for the £11.9 million that was spent by Brick on overheads and admin. This is Brick that are yet to deliver any occupied houses across the borough. So really our summation of all of this was an asking that Councillor Tony Newman, the head of the council, and the council generally, tries to be a bit spendthrift or a bit less spendthrift in 2019, and actually looks after taxpayers' money and makes a resolution to that effect. So we can but hope so.
Indeed, and I think the council's complaining about central funding from central government being reduced. That's why they feel they have to put the council tax up so much. But also, they've gone and voted through a rise in their allowances, haven't they, this year? What are the figures on that, Mike?
So that was a 2% for backbenchers and 4.4% for frontbenchers. So, don't know how many of you had a 2% pay rise for doing the same job. Don't know how many of you had a 4.4% pay rise for doing the same job. And interestingly, of course, for a Labour council that often believes that managers shouldn't get big bonuses when their workers are having to cut back, they of course voted that for themselves. But it's, most of us do not live off these sort of pay rises. The dates of big pay rises have kind of gone away unless you change your job and change what you're doing in some way. Not true for councillors. Not true for councillors who protest to have no money.
Indeed. So time will tell whether they pay any attention to that. But it's been a busy year otherwise in politics in Croydon, hasn't it, Mike? We've had some local elections under the new system, the new ward boundaries. And Labour did again win those elections. What would you pick out from this year, Mike?
Well, so as you say, Dan, new council was elected in May. Both of us stood in New Addington North and New Addington South. But many people listening to this will stand and will know who stand. The result was an 11-seat majority for Labour, 41 to 29. Now that's sounds bigger than it is in the sense that many of the wards are 3-member wards. Not all of them are. There are a number of 2-member and there's even a 1-member ward, but many are 3-member. If 2 of them had changed, that would have been a Conservative majority of 1. And it's not necessarily the case that all members have to be from the same party, but it generally is the case. So the new party was in. I don't see, unfortunately, with one exception, really much personal voting, or much by the way of people picking up on events in Croydon in the way they voted. It just feels like the north of the borough really hardened to Labour, and the south of the borough stayed firmly Conservative, with the exception of New Allington and Addiscombe, which we'll come on to. There wasn't really a kind of a much of a reflection to or reaction to the positive or negative effects of what the council had done that I could see. I'll put that as neutrally as possible. I think it really was almost you voted for the red rosette or you voted for the blue rosette.
It does seem to be the case. I mean, the ward in which I live, Fairfield, the boundaries of that changed, and when you saw those boundary changes, you kind of knew that it would go from a 3-seat Conservative ward to a 3-seat Labour ward, because the more conservative part of the ward had been moved elsewhere, and that is exactly what happened. But that was back in May. There's been some developments recently. You mentioned earlier, Mike, about the potential for a general election in the not too distant future. I believe the Conservatives have selected the candidate for Croydon Central. What do we know about that?
Yes, indeed. So Croydon Central have, and this is under at the moment, the current constituency boundaries for Croydon Central. They are due to change in the publications, and assuming that all the legislation goes through to change the boundaries. But as things stand, Mario Cretura has been, who's the ward councillor for Causden Town, where I live. He's the chief whip for Croydon Conservatives, and he works at number 10, slightly disparagingly often referred to as the Prime Minister's chief tweeter. He's in some sort of marketing and social media role. Mario has been selected as the candidate. Interestingly, of course, in Leave voting Croydon Central, that means Sarah Jones and Mario, two Remain supporters, have both been selected as candidates for a Leave voting constituency, proving once again how in touch our political elites are with the pulse of people in the borough.
Yeah, it is interesting. Obviously, Gavin Barwell was previously the Member of Parliament. He lost his seat in the snap election of 2017 and was then effectively promoted, given a huge pay rise, and is Theresa May's Chief of Staff. He then promptly brought Mario in as you say, the social media officer of some description. So he's very, very well connected with the current Conservative leadership. So time will tell how he gets on in Croydon Central should an election be held on the current boundaries. But as you say, it's possible that those boundaries will change. They were supposed to have changed a few years ago, but whether they can actually get that legislation through Parliament with the current arithmetic, it's doubtful, I think.
Just want to pick up on a couple of things around Croydon Council. Lots of new councillors come in. Not sure I'm aware of all of them, but a couple of names to know. Robert Ward, who was elected in one of the Selsdons, and I confess I can't remember which. Robert was heavily involved in the Croydon Citizen when that was around, and I might come on to that. He does a really interesting tweet blog, if you like, of Croydon Council meetings, hashtag Croydon Live when they're on. He does it now from the council chamber, and they're well worth the read if anyone's interested. It's generally fairly disparaging about the whole affair, and it's just quite funny. One of the new councillors in Dan's ward in Fairfield was Chris Clark for Labour, and he also's on a podcast for now what used to be called Homesdale Radio, now Back of the Nest podcast. Just an interesting thing. Someone clearly involved in the community, and good to see him there. Just wanted to touch upon the one ward where it wasn't vote for the Rosette, and I just thought it was quite interesting. Addiscombe East Ward, in the election became a split ward. So we had both a Labour and a Conservative councillor returned. Really close result for the Conservative councillor. That was someone called Jet Baines, who was a former councillor here in Coulsdon and moved up to, I believe, where he lives in Addiscombe East and ran for election. And himself and Maddie Henson for Labour, who's a lady of quite strong local roots and standing. I used to live in Addiscombe. I'd seen her around many a times involved in things. Both won election, one Labour, one Conservative. Just really interesting to see, really good to see the people of Addiscombe actually make a choice for a candidate rather than necessarily for a party. What was most interesting there, I think, was that Miss Skipper, the Labour candidate that lost really by a handful of votes to Jet, is a big momentum organiser. There is some talk of her being put up for the GLA seat when that comes for Croydon and Sutton for Labour. But someone, for Labour to have put someone who's really quite extreme in Labour circles in a marginal ward like Addiscombe, that's really a middle-of-the-road area. It's not too Labour, it's not too Conservative, it's very sort of middle of the middle. And I say this, someone that lived there most of my life, in fact. It's interesting choice for them to make, and one that I'm tempted to say they were rightly punished for.
Indeed. I think it's really quite good to see people being elected based upon the record and the local standing. I think we'd like to see that probably more, certainly in local politics, where people probably should know their councillor. I suspect many people have no idea who their councillor is, and many people don't know who their MP is. They just go along and vote for the red rosette or the blue rosette, whereas it would make people a lot more accountable if they actually knew who they were. Mike, you mentioned the Croydon Citizen there. Sadly, that's closed its doors, basically, even though it was not really a building, as it were.
Yeah.
But metaphorically, it's closed its doors. It's quite sad, really, for local politics and local debate, I think.
It really is. Croydon Citizen allow people of all views to write articles on cultural, social, political, economic issues, events, thoughts in Croydon. Citizen journalism. It was a great way of exposing, and we're thinking of the political stuff, political thought that would not covered in the mainstream newspapers like the Guardian and the Advertiser. And I understand that they are news rather than in depth, and I would thank both of them for covering. Dan and I recently left UKIP. That was a good bit of local journalism. But the Citizen allowed a bit more of an in-depth review, and it had leading people from both parties, and indeed I often wrote for them. I think something we're really going to miss in Croydon is an independent voice looking that bit deeper around key events in the borough. I can only hope that something comes forward. We don't have it anywhere else in our politics here, or indeed in our business or cultural events. Not perhaps of such interest to me, some of the other events, but I do. I'm sure the Citizen served them very well, and in fact I know it did. Really has missed that. Hopefully something comes forward. We're not quite in that mode, but we do have a website, and if you want to write for it, if you've got stuff you want to say about Croydon, and it's got that kind of classically liberal idea to it, or it's around the politics, get in contact. We'll put it up. I recently wrote an article, not specifically to Croydon, but about green issues more generally. I know a number of you are interested in the environment and in climate change. And as you may have noted, by the way, I said that I have some concerns and lack some faith in it in the global warming industry. So have a read of that, and if it inspires you, come and write for us and get your thoughts published out there, and we will certainly help push them. But a real loss for Croydon that we don't have an independent voice doing that anymore.
Indeed. Well, that's enough of 2018. Let's look forward and have a bit of fun maybe at this festive time of year. Predictions for 2019. dangerous things to do, predicting some of the things that are going on at the moment. Mike, what's your first prediction for 2019?
Palace FA Cup. Oh, sorry, politics. So Palace are going to start their FA Cup run against Grimsby on the 5th. I don't know who we're going to get next, but it's going to be a roaring success. No, I think so. Predictions. Yes. Well, we know, despite our call on Croydon Council to act more responsibly with taxpayers' money, I fear they will continue to waste it on white elephant arts projects. We know that they're somehow involved in an event in Lloyd's Park in the summer, with tickets at the incredibly reasonable price of £140-something. I don't know what public money is going into that, and there may be none, to be fair, but that would be unusual for Croydon Council not to try and put money into it. I suspect Croydon Council may also buy some more infrastructure around the town, pretending that they are either retailers or hoteliers at certain times. I lack faith in my council tax funds being more sensibly spent. So that would be my fairly safe prediction for the year. How about yourself, Dan?
Yeah, my sadly safe prediction is that I suspect that Westfield will still be up in the air, and we still won't get a new shopping centre as more and more shops close in anticipation of that, and the town centre will just get worse. It really does not have to be that way, but time will tell. One prediction I do have, and this is a slightly dangerous prediction, is that the quality of the audio on future podcasts should be better than it is recording on an iPhone, as I've spent my Christmas money on a new swanky Blue Yeti microphone. So hopefully there'll be some improvement in the audio for podcasts in the new year. I don't know if we've got any other predictions, have we? It's pretty tough to make any at the moment.
It is. I mean, the obvious prediction is around Brexit for us to make. I'm incredibly reluctant to make that prediction. Who knows? We know the law is in place for us to leave on the 29th of March. It's hard to see what will stop that. However, I also believe that Theresa May actually may have negotiated us leaving the EU, not staying in it at one point. So what a fool I am on these things. I would put a prediction that there won't be a move to another referendum. I don't necessarily mean that makes me think we will leave. I don't necessarily mean that there won't be another general election between now and then, but I don't think there will be another referendum. I believe enough people get how angry we would be and how risky it would be for them if MPs were to actually follow through with enough referendum, and how that would be the end of their legitimacy and the positions that the laudable positions they occupy if they were to do that. So I'd go out on a limb on that one.
I very much hope that's right, and I suspect it is, because, like you say, it's a Westminster bubble. It's a London conversation. The people's vote. There is no way that what's her name, Brenda from Bristol, wants another referendum. People in the rest of the country just want to get on with Brexit. They do not want another referendum, and it would be a complete affront to democracy not to have implemented the decision of the people back in 2016. So fingers crossed on that. As you said, Mike, people can write for the website. They can get in touch. They can appear on the podcast. Really like to hear from you if you've got any stories about Croydon Council waste, or just your views generally on Brexit and sort of classically liberal issues in and around Croydon. Mike, how can people get in contact with us?
Yeah, so on Twitter at Croydon Const, on the Facebook at Croydon Constitutionalists. Our website is croydonconstitutionalist.uk, and our email is croydonconstitutionalist@gmail.com.
Cheers. So what else have we got coming up then in the next few weeks? Well, we'll no doubt be doing another podcast, so do please subscribe to that and do listen to that. We've mentioned the Levers of Croydon drinks on January 22nd in the Skylark in South Croydon from 7 p.m. And yeah, just get in touch and comment upon the articles and the podcast. That'd be great. So basically, finally, I think it's just for the two of us to thank you for listening to us for, I believe it's our 6th podcast, and to wish you all a great festive season and a happy and prosperous new year. So until next time, it's Happy New Year from me.
And Happy New Year from me.
Happy New Year.